All right, welcome back to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. Today I am speaking with Hernan. I'm not going to butcher his last name, I already butchered it at the start of the episode, so you'll hear that. But Hernan is a pretty cool dude. I've been following him for a while across social media, just a font of knowledge when it comes to internet marketing, different funnels. And he's been through the gamut. Like he's kind of went through all the great brands of direct response copywriting in his own journey in marketing. So if you are doing paid media or if you're thinking about doing paid media, especially with meta ads, this is the episode for you. We get into some quasi more advanced topics too, like what kind of funnels should you be using, why you should probably be using all the funnels and create an ecosystem around it, and some more of the nuanced stuff because he has actually hired paid media people before for pretty large companies, including Frank Kern when he worked with Frank Kern. So this was a joy for me to do this interview. And I think if you've been wanting to really cut your teeth in paid media and get off of the SEO train for a bit, then this is probably a good episode for you. That said, I'll get off my soapbox. I'll see you on the other side. All right, I am here with Hernan Vazquez, and I should have asked you, how do I say your last name? I'm so sorry, Hernan. How do I say your last name?
It's Vazquez. You got that. Almost 95% there, which is a lot.
Also, because my Alaskan accent, it comes to save the day once more. Well, Hernan, I'm so glad that you're here. We were talking a little bit offline about us kind of like having a dance back and forth to try to make this podcast happen. But I'm a big fan of your content. I see it on my Facebook feed, sometimes on LinkedIn. And now as I messaged you, I'm being haunted by your ads or some kind of retargeting mechanism. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think paid media is in a super interesting space here today. So before we get into it, why don't you tell the audience who you are if they're not familiar with the legend?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for having me. First and foremost, I'm excited for this conversation. And I'm Hernan. I'm from Argentina, originally Buenos Aires, South America, and I've been doing this digital marketing dance for 15 years now, and fully doing paid media full time over the past 12, close to 13 years. And yeah, I've been blessed. I've been honored to work with some of the biggest names in the digital marketing industry. So, I kind of got, and I was able to see behind the curtains, right? Like peek behind the curtains as to what these guys are doing, how they think about paid media, which I think it's a huge thing, right? Especially when we talk to entrepreneurs, how to think about paid media, how that fits into your overarching marketing ecosystem and strategy. So I've been doing it. I spent close to $170 million in ad spend. Most of that has been in Meta. I want to say probably 80% of that has been in Meta, both my money, clients' money. So and we've had to, pivot, adapt, launch things, and kind of do all of those, fun things that you do when you're doing marketing, specifically on the paid media side of things. So I'm excited to share as much as I can here and add as much value as possible. So
I'm curious on a couple of things before we dive super into it, but with your experience, I don't want to color this question, so I don't want to give you any special bias, but I have a friend, he runs a pretty solid business, coaching program type of business, very good for paid ads. He doesn't do any paid ads at the moment, but he was asking me for advice on which way he should go in terms of like organic marketing and paid marketing. From your experience, what would you tell someone who's trying to decide? It doesn't have to be a coaching business, but really any business. If someone's trying to decide where should they put their money, should they try to put it in more into the organic, takes a lot of time, the content type of stuff, but costs, marginally no money, or more into the paid media realm? Like, where would you usually advise them? And you can put caveats there. What that answer might be different based on who they are.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great question. And, if you ask me probably 2 years ago, I would have said, maybe a year ago, I would have said, go all in on ads, right? And because I'm a hardcore direct response, like turn $1 into more than $1 as fast as humanly possible type of guy. But now, to be completely honest, I'm not so sure. I think that things have been kind of getting blurry between the paid and the organic side of things, right? Specifically how the networks operate. And this is something that I learned back when I was working with Frank Kern. This was pre-pandemic. I was Frank Kern's marketing guy and ads guy for 3.5, almost 4 years. And he showed me a lot of things, many, many things that I learned from him. But one of the biggest things that I learned from him is the power of putting a little bit of money behind the content that you're putting out there, right? So if you're putting out organic content, which a lot of people are, you can accelerate the results that you get just by putting a little bit of money behind it, right? And then, so that has been shifting. Right now, I would tell you do both if you can, right? Because it's actually getting easier, in my opinion. It's actually getting easier, other than, I want to say March. We're recording this in April 2026. So March
There's
2026
been
on
some
that.
rumble for the paid
It's been,
media world recently.
yeah, yeah, it's been rough, but other than that, it's getting easier, to get results on ads. So things that used to be really complicated and really threatening for a lot of people, I get a lot of people in my community that it's the first time running ads. They have a successful business, they have great content, they are organic people, they have a proven offer. And for some reason, it's hard to go over that hump of just hitting publish on that first ad. So we're helping them with that. But now it's kind of, I would say 50-50. If you can do both, definitely do both. And if you like speed like me, you could do, 70-30, 70% being ads, 30% being organic, if that makes sense.
This is a very interesting answer to me. So my background is SEO. So I'm in the organic side, right? I built Empire Flippers primarily on the back of SEO and conferences and networking podcasts like this. Like I told you, I'll hard sell you on selling whatever your next business is you're building currently. Don't worry about it. Got to make this ROI positive, right? But my own mindset has shifted. Like I used to think SEO is where people should start. Like if you only have a hammer, you always think like that's the way every problem is a nail, right? But as I've learned more and more about all these different channels, and to be honest, with Google shakeup in the whole AI realm, has been quite a insane chaos in the Google search for the last couple of years, in my view, with LLMs coming online and all that stuff. Now I feel like paid media is the way to go, and I feel like people sometimes make this mistake, and you're the expert here, so you can tell me if I'm wrong here. But I feel like people make this mistake where I'm just going to start with organic first until I get some traction, and then I'm going to move into paid ads. But the issue in my mind is the feedback loop is so long to make organic work. Like an SEO campaign for a brand new site could take 6-8 months longer, depending on the niche you're in, right? And if you're doing YouTube or just even social media posting, like it could take a while to actually know that you actually have a good offer. You're reaching enough audience to know if you have a good offer. So I feel like what you said there, like if you want speed, you go with ads. I just feel like ads is the better route to try to get through that whole iteration process to see if you even have a working offer before you spend, potentially months on the organic side. Like, what do you think about that? Is that right? Because I've heard like sometimes what converts on organic doesn't necessarily translate to ads as well, but works in ads does tend to do okay on the organic side. So, what are your thoughts there?
No, that's a great point of view. And I do agree with you. I think that, I recently started being more active when it comes to my organic content, and only because we have kind of, built these AI systems, because I was never really consistent when it comes to organic content, because it just
This is the
takes
other
a lot of
problem.
time, right? Yeah, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and whatnot. So I've been recently, and by recently, I mean over the past 30 to 45 days, being a little bit more active on putting content out there organically, but it was never my strong suit. I wanted to launch an ad, get results, get feedback, and get market validation as fast as possible. And to your point, I think that there's some things that you can do on the ads that then will translate to organic, because it is true what you just said. I always said that, ads that work, for example, with your warm audience, those people that know you, they follow you, they visited your website, they are in your list and whatnot. Those ads and those offers that work well for those people, sometimes they don't work well for cold traffic, meaning people that do not know who you are, they haven't heard about you, which is the vast majority of people, right? But the opposite, it's true. When you launch something to cold traffic and then you start seeing a response, if you translate that to your warm audience, to your organic side of things, then generally it takes off, right? So with that being said, there are some things that you can do right now to accelerate the process with ads, with the offers, to see what's going to resonate and whatnot before you go all in on an organic strategy, which, you come from an SEO background. I cut my teeth in SEO, so I know what you're talking about.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope you've recovered.
Yeah, no, I got you. I still have a little bit of PTSD from that, from that stage. So, God bless you. But no, in all seriousness, there are some things that you can do to test with ads that then translate really nicely into an organic push or content or an organic offer and that type of stuff for sure.
Love it. So it sounds like pretty much that is true. My observation there, more or less.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yes. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Let's back up here real quick. Like, I didn't know you actually worked for Frank Kern. Tell me a bit about that. Like, how did that come about?
Oh, that was great. Yeah, so I followed Frank for, I don't know, probably 5 years before I got to work with him. And I've always been a big fan of like getting into the right circles or trying to get yourself, surround yourself with the right, with the right people. And at that point, funny enough, I had this company with a couple of partners in the US, and it was mostly an SEO. We were teaching other SEO agency owners how to do SEO for their clients, right? Because the singing voice, Bradley, at that point, he was big into SEO and local, specifically local SEO, right? And then we launch a couple courses, and then I raise my hand and I say, hey, I want to run some traffic to this. So at that point I started learning Facebook ads at the same time that I was doing SEO on my own. But at some point Frank came up with this offer, which was the Frank Kern Inner Circle. I remember it was $400 a month, and it was a lot of money for me at that point. I couldn't really afford it. So I went to my partners and said, hey, I want us collectively see if we can chip in, and then I can join the community, and then I'll share with you all of the learnings and teachings and courses and whatnot. So we did that. And then I started just, helping people in the community with their ads, right? Just saying, hey, this is what we're doing that's working. So I started helping people. And then at some point, Frank's team noticed that. And they were like, hey, do you want to help us moderate the community? We'll waive the $400 a month. Do you want to help us moderate? And I said, of course, sure, let's do it. And then eventually, Frank started looking for media buyers for his agency that he was building back in the day. So, they reach out and they say, hey, you're doing this. You want to come work with us? And I said, yes, of course. So I started working with him. And then his main marketing guy and the guy that he was like running all of the ads for him kind of stepped away to do his own thing. So there was a void there. So Frank reached out and said, hey, do you want to help me run my ads too? So from that point forward, for the next, 3.5, 4 years, I run his ads. I, visited several times in Miami when he was in Miami, and then, help him build a couple of things there. But it was all about like being in the right circles and just being super helpful there. And you get noticed by the people that were kind of, running the whole game. So that's it. That's how I got that gig, if you would. So.
That's super cool, man. Like, I've known of Frank Kern since I was a kid, man. Like, back when he was the surfer internet marketer with the long hair, with all those insane like VSLs with the yellow boxes with the hyphens around them. So I've learned a lot from Frank over the years, though I've never actually spoken with him. Though I did speak with some Indian guy pretending to be him who almost got me, which was a quite funny back and forth in of itself. But that's cool. So after you worked with Frank Kern, you left and you started your own agency. Is that kind of like the entrepreneurial path that you took?
Yeah, for sure. So then while I was working with Frank, I also got the chance to work with Grant Cardone. So I was Grant Cardone's marketing director for one of his verticals, one of his agencies. And then at that point, I had to hire and train media buyers as well as, running ads for a bunch of people. So I had to train and hire media buyers. And then from there on out, yeah, I went ahead and started getting clients on my own. So that's how I started building, my agency. But based off of that initial interaction, I ended up working with, advising Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi team. I wrote ads and run ads for Agora Publishing, and a bunch of other people like Patrick
Oh,
Bet-David.
all the great hits of direct
Yeah,
response marketing, dude.
yeah,
You like
it was fun.
going to each different village of direct response marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. It's been fun.
Yeah, I bet it was also extremely stressful. I can't imagine those people are easy to work with on average. Maybe Franker, I don't know any of them personally. Maybe they are, but I bet you learned a ton. Speaking of that, before we move back into like the ad stuff, this is always something I tell entrepreneurs to do, right? I help them sell their businesses. So they always ask me, what can I do to increase the value of my business? And I always joke with them, like, well, how useful are you to your own company? And you know how entrepreneurs are. We all have a little bit of an ego. Like, this thing would fall apart without me. I'm the number one thing, whatever. Like, okay, well, I'm a very valuable business then. Because like, if you want to have a valuable business, you should be the most useless person in your own company by hiring people who are way better at the thing that you are. So you said you've hired a lot of paid media buyers. I feel like that's something people struggle with quite a lot. What would be your advice to an entrepreneur who's looking to hire their first media buyer?
That's a great question. And yeah, I hired and trained a lot of media buyers. And, and here's something that interesting when it comes to media buyers in general is that when I had to train and hire media buyers, we were out building a business out in Aventura, Florida, So we were there. I had to kind of move there for several months, building the business and whatnot. But we realized that it was really hard to find people like nearby, right? So that's the first thing. It's like, if you want talent, generally speaking, you're going to try and go ahead and hire remotely, right? So that's the one thing, because good media buyers, you need to offer a really good deal for them to relocate, and I know that some entrepreneurs, they want to have like an office and people in-house and whatnot. So we did kind of a hybrid model. Some people were in-house, but most people, especially the media buying team, was remote because we were hunting for talent. That's the first thing. The other thing is that I would say up to the point that you're spending 10, maybe 20K a month in ads and things are working, you probably do not need to hire a media buyer or an agency for that matter. That's something important. Or maybe you need to hire somebody that it's advising or part-time. That's something important, because generally speaking, when you hire an agency, when you hire a media buyer, they're going to help you expand and scale what's already there. Right. So if your offer is not hitting, it's not converting, it doesn't matter if you hire the best agency in the world. You need to work on your offer. You need to make it work. Right. And again, going back to these, organic versus paid side of things, you can get away with DM ads on Instagram, which are super easy to set up. You can get away with just pushing out the content and then receiving DMs. So up to the point that you're spending, I want to say 10 to 20K a month, probably you don't need a media buyer, or somebody full-time. You might get away with somebody part-time. And then the third thing that I would say is that really good media buyers will have other things going on. And that's kind of expected, right? So can you bring somebody in full-time? Yes, you can. But the really good media buyers, people that are doing this every day, day in and day out, they have so many options. Like, to be honest, they could be doing things on their own. They could be doing affiliate and whatnot. So they're going to have some other things going on. They might have some other clients, and you need to be okay with that fact, right? You need to be okay with that fact, or you need to be ready to pay a lot of money.
That is one of the hardest parts about hiring marketers, not just paid media, but like marketers who, I guess I'm insulting myself here, because marketers who really understand how to do it, like they're doing some crazy stuff on their own almost every time, right?
Right.
And marketers are creative. We're cats, right? We're always trying new things. So
Yeah,
shiny
exactly.
object syndrome to the extreme. All that makes total sense to me. And I think one of the key things you just said there is if you're only spending 10 to 20K a month, you're not ready for a media buyer. I think that's true as well, because you're looking at a salary of probably at least 6, 8 grand a month just to the employee, I assume around there, maybe more. You said another thing there that I think this is a very common mistake people have, whether they're hiring a marketer or an agency, that if you don't have an offer, like you're not ready yet for the agency, like a working offer. And I think a lot of people, and again, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking the agency is going to give them the winning strategy, when I feel like agencies are actually better to implement winning tactics for a winning strategy. Like you already kind of figure out how to make it work, and it's all messy and maybe it's a little bit unclear, and then the agency owner's like, oh, let me fix all this stuff with these different levers and stuff we can pull that you have no idea even existed, right? Do you feel that's true? Like you should have this winning strategy and the agency is more the tactician for you rather than the strategy?
Yeah, 100%. I think that a good agency will come in and help you scale or expand what's already working for you, right? And generally speaking, like the offer is the most important thing. So if you're struggling getting people to give you money, right? It doesn't matter what kind of agency you're going to hire, right? It doesn't really matter what kind of agency you're going to hire. If you're struggling with that part, probably that's not the time to do it. Once you get people consistently giving you money for what you're offering, right? You found that product to market match or product to market fit and whatnot, and you're trying to scale. And generally, they can help you scale in one channel, right? That's another thing that I see a lot of people, and this is working with some big names. And I remember that I worked with this business during the pandemic that they grew to $100 million in valuation in 2 years, right? Because we were scaling so much on the ad side of things, right? And they figured out that they had, a good winning strategy, and they got the numbers when it comes to paid media. So we were able to scale, pretty fast. We were spending close to $3 million a month in ad spend, between Facebook and YouTube. But one of the things that they did really well is that they focused on, one funnel. They focused on one strategy, one sales process, and they scaled that to the max, right? And by that, I mean, okay, now they hire different agencies to come in and, sprinkle their fairy dust or do their magic sauce on the different channels and whatnot. But at some point, we were working with maybe 6 or 7 other agencies, a couple YouTube agencies, a couple TikTok agencies, a couple, Meta agencies and whatnot. And we were all like sending traffic to kind of the same overarching strategy. So that's how you scale, right? Because each of us have different ways of approaching, things. But they got to that point where they could actually, get buyers through the door on their own. And then they thought, okay, we're onto something here. Now we start hiring. Now we start bringing in extra help. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I think, especially if you're hiring an agency, you should be hiring a specialist. Like if you're hiring an in-house marketer, I think you're probably better off with someone like me that's a generalist who kind of speaks the jargon of all these different channels a bit. I'm no Hernan when it comes to meta ads, but I understand some of the stuff that's going on there so we can communicate effectively back and forth when you're killing it for me, right? So I generally agree with that. So you've been in paid media for over a decade. You mentioned earlier that Meta has gotten easier, like paid media in general has gotten easier. So I'm curious to hear how that has changed, and maybe we can cap it off with the troubles that happened in March, because a lot of my paid media friends have been groaning about that. So walk me through that journey. How has the paid media platforms changed for the better, and what's happening right now that's causing some trouble?
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to kind of paint a picture of, what has happened on the paid media side of things, and I might deviate or talk a little bit more about Meta because that has been, again, 80%,
Sure.
70 to 80% of my experience. But I do see, that platforms are following kind of the same trends across the board, Google, TikTok, and some other platforms. The biggest change, so there's been, I think, 2 biggest shifts of the past several years when it comes to paid advertising. The first one is that the costs have been going up, steadily going up. I remember when, back in the day when I was working with this SEO company that I was a part of, we were able to get leads in the US in Meta for like 20 cents, 25 cents qualified leads, right? Then a couple years later, we were able to get, webinar registrations for like $2 to $3 in the US, right? And then, I don't know, 40% of those leads would attend a webinar, right? Or we were able to get $80 to $100 booked appointments, to sell a high ticket offer, no problem. But the reality is that those costs have been steadily going up year after year after year. I like to think that they've been going up because Meta and Facebook, Instagram, they haven't been growing as much as they used to grow on their user base, but there's been more money flowing into the auction, right? Flowing into and competing for the same eyeballs. So the cost to acquire customers, the cost to acquire leads, the CPMs, the cost per 1,000 impressions, they've been steadily going up. So one of the things that people have been struggling with the most is the math. They could make their ads work with 2012, 2015, 2017 math. But 10 years later, the math has changed, right? They could make their webinars or their VSLs or their challenges or their groups or whatever the lead magnets work when they were paying $3 a lead, $4 a lead, but now we're paying 15, right? So there hasn't been and I see this at every level. I have a lot of high level friends and entrepreneurs that I talk to, and they've been struggling with this too, the rising cost of advertising, right? So that's, I think, it's one shift. So whoever hasn't been updating their strategies and even updating their math on their funnels, right? If they haven't been actually doing their jobs and being diligent, they've been struggling big time. That's, I think, one of the biggest shifts when it comes to advertising. The other biggest shift has been that, and this is more on the, if you want, technical side of things, is that we had to kind of switch hats from a media buying perspective, trying to find that ideal audience, trying to find those, I don't know, 60 interests, right? That we would target and people will engage with us, and trying to only target the Facebook feeds and trying to do all of these like media buying jujitsu, right? With like manual biddings and this and that, the other thing, there's been a big shift towards the creative, right? Because at the end of the day, paid media is two things: is who you show your ads to and what your ad says, right? So who you show your ads to is the targeting, and then what your ads say is the creative. And we've seen a big shift between targeting into the creative. So now I keep on saying that the creative does a lot of your targeting. For people like me, that has been a big shift because, again, I was a hardcore media buyer that had to turn into a creative strategist or somebody that understands creative, especially creative diversity, which is something that Andromeda, needs. The latest, Facebook algorithm change, it needs a lot of creative diversity. So, people have been kind of operating from this, old mentality that I'm going to try to find my ideal audience. While if you would like step back and let Meta do its thing with the algorithm and the AI and the machine learning behind the scenes, and you would focus on creating really good ads, then that makes things so much easier. And that's also been the case on Google, right? Google has shifted also with PMAX and some other type of campaigns where you just give Google a bunch of assets and then you need really good ads, and then you let it go out there and find you buyers. So those, I think, has been the two biggest shifts when it comes to advertising. One has been the rising ad costs, and the other one has been the change from targeting to creative. And people that have been adapting, they're been winning, and people that haven't, they have been struggling a lot with ads, if that makes sense.
Totally, I do. I remember, 10 years ago when I first joined EF, like the media buyers, they were reminding me of day traders, like Forex day traders, with the way they were doing all the spreadsheet math and everything. And then when, I guess it was probably a few years ago now, where Facebook really leaned into the creative thing, there was the whole meme of like veteran Facebook ad guy with all his spreadsheets, and then the chat Facebook guy, like broad, no targeting, right? Well, the my day trader friends, they didn't know what to do. Like the day trader marketers, they kind of like lost out. They never made the transition back to like what marketing really is, which is that creative storytelling done in an ad, right?
Mhm.
So that's been very interesting to watch and inspiring for me personally, because like I said, I'm an SEO guy, and the only reason I'm not a black hat SEO is because I'm not very technical. So it's just always easier to be a white hat brand builder SEO for me. Though I much respect to my black hat friends. But yeah, that's fascinating to me. And the economics is interesting. Like, what are people doing on the economics? Like, I understand, and maybe this is good to talk with our audience about this, is I understand you need to have something to liquidate the ads, which is, you're a big fan of low ticket, which we'll get into here in a second. And then you need to have some of these upsells. And I think with informational courses and masterminds, these like your typical like marketer direct response kind of funnel, I think that can work well. But when it comes to, quote unquote, more real businesses, like how do they go about doing this? Like, how does the Amazon FBA entrepreneur go and like counter this rising ad cost, or the Shopify store owner, the SaaS owner, or the agency owner running? Well, the agency owner can do the direct response info stuff, so they got that covered. But how do these other businesses handle this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I'm a big fan of setting up the strategy so that you can liquidate as much as possible, as fast as possible from your ads. And I've seen a lot of people like switch gears into the low ticket world. I had several clients that they were doing really well with like straight high ticket, type of offer, coaching programs and whatnot. But then the math didn't math anymore, right? So we had to look for alternatives, and we have switched gears to a low ticket offer, and things started, popping back again. And funny enough, like low ticket offers, they have been around forever. Like I learned it
Yeah.
back from Frank Kern. I remember that, I started running his, I think it was Convert 2.0 book, or How to Get Consulting Clients Fast, which were, these two booklets. And we were actually profitable on the front end, like front end profitable back in the day, right? Which is not how most businesses operate. Most businesses operate at a loss initially,
Yep.
and then the lifetime value catches up, right? Like I remember that I had this SaaS client once that they came in VC backed, deep pockets. They were doing the seed rounds, type of approach to marketing and whatnot, super deep pockets. So they were like, hey, listen, if we break even in 2 years, we're fine, we're good, right?
This is a
And then
short
we,
timeline for a company like that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And and they were fine. Like, they were selling a SaaS, I think it was an accounting SaaS business. So they were like, if we break even in 2 years, we're fine. And with some strategies, we shortened that curve to 6 months, and they were ecstatic about it. But that's not how a lot of bootstrap businesses operate. They need to spend money and make a return as fast as possible. So that's when the low ticket comes in. And I like the low ticket offer or the low ticket approach for several reasons, because like that's one of the ways that I used to grow my agency. Before I sold it to my partner, that's one of the ways that I used to grow my agency. We would get, of course, we do referrals, we do organic, but one of the ways that we would do it is we'd have courses like information, and then on the upsells we would say, hey, would you want us to put together a strategy for you for a couple $100? And people will say yes, and then some people will decide to hire us, right, retain us after going through that process. So that was one way that I used to grow my agency. Then pretty much any professional services can do this. The book funnels, they work amazingly well. And then when it comes to SaaS businesses, they also lend themselves really well to grow this. I'm actually co-owner of a SaaS company, it's a tracking SaaS company, and we're growing that SaaS company through the same strategy. We have some education, some information on the front end, right? Either a course or a mini course or a guide or something like that. We sell that for cheap. And then the upsell is generally the recurring model, right? It's like, hey, would you want to try our SaaS? I have several friends doing that. Russell Brunson, for example, grew ClickFunnels like that, education first and then books and whatnot. And then ClickFunnels was kind of an upsell. So it lends itself really well to pretty much any kind of model. On the physical goods side of things, on the the Shopify, the e-com side of things, it's generally how you position and what kind of strategy you have to acquire these customers. So if you're okay acquiring a customer, and then generally as an upsell, you either offer more of the same if you're selling something consumable like toothpaste, or if you're selling coffee, or if you're selling supplements, right? It's more of the same. Subscription models lend themselves really well as upsells too, on those type of funnels. But the main point is that regardless of the business, the goal is to acquire a customer, because at the end of the day, you're paying to acquire a customer, and make the math work so that at the point of transaction, or as close as possible to the point of transaction, it could be at the point of transaction over the next 7 days, you're liquidating as much as possible, as fast as possible. So for info, we say, okay, if we're paying $40 to get a buyer for a mini course, we want our average order value to be as close as possible to $40 or more, right? Because that way we can scale the ads, and then any transaction that happens after that window, it gets closer and closer to profitability, right? So the goal is to get closer to profitability, compensate a little bit for these increasing costs with some sort of low ticket offer. And then also there's a big psychological shift when somebody gives you money, even if it's like $5 or $7 or whatever, versus a lead magnet. There's somebody that opts in for a free thing. Generally the commitment is less, the engagement is less, but when you get buyers, that's a different story, right? So that's why I'm a big fan of these low ticket strategies, and why I see a lot of entrepreneurs pivoting to some sort of low ticket offer to acquire customers.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And like the physical product example that I always use, the analogy at least, is kind of like the Costco sampler. You have the person just like giving you a little snack or whatever, and then they sell you the big thing afterwards. So I always tell my e-commerce friends, like, what's your snack? What's your sample that you can sell? And where the obvious thing for the customer to do is to upgrade, like the next step, right? And try to make that as frictionless as possible. I agree with that. But you're a master of many funnels. You mentioned many different types of funnels already on this podcast. So I have a question for you. Like, let's say Empire Flippers, right? One of our hardest parts is marketing, because we have such a very long sales cycle. Like, you made the terrible mistake of not selling your agency with me, of course. So like, we need to figure this out, right? One of our constant issues is such a long sales cycle. Like, I wouldn't mind doing a low ticket course. Like, that seems to like make sense for a lot the smaller end of our segment. It wouldn't make sense for like the bigger end. And what I mean by that is like the businesses over $10 million in valuation. Like they're not buying courses on how to buy one, first of all, because if they're looking at that kind of business, they're probably private equity, right? And the seller's certainly not looking at that. So I could see a low ticket being maybe an exit planning or a buyer mandate thing there. But then there's other funnels, like book a call funnels. So I see this argument, it goes back and forth, just the trend always flips with the low ticket people to direct to the high ticket. So in my case, the direct to high ticket is me running the ad like, book a call with me right now to sell your business, right? Like go straight for the jugular. Talk to me about these different funnels. When should you use them? I have a feeling you should always be testing them, but like what kind of strategy informs what kind of funnel you should be using?
No, I love that question. And to your point, it does depend a lot how you're positioning that front end low ticket offer and what you're saying. Because, like, for example, for Empire Flippers, right? A book, for example, or a mini course on how to get 20x multiple on your SaaS business will attract way different people that how to sell your coaching, business for 7 figures, right? So what you say and how to say it and how you position the offers, those front end offers, it matters a lot because you want to position those front end offers to attract the ideal client that you can work with on the back end, right?
Yep.
So the way I like to see this is I like to see this as an ecosystem. I think that the times of just doing one funnel, right, and going all in on one funnel and then just spending massive amounts of money and time on just one funnel, they're kind of going away, right? Because people are in different platforms, they're in different mindsets, they're in different, awareness stages. If you do the straight to book a call, you are basically, pigeonholing yourself to those people that are problem aware or even solution aware, and they want to pull the trigger right now. But there's a lot of people that they're not even thinking that they could sell their business, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think that different strategies will attract different people. However, I always start with the end in mind. And generally speaking, the businesses that are kind of struggling the most that I'm working with or that I talk to right now are those straight up to book a call, go for the jugular, high ticket sell from a cold ad, trying to get 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 grand out of a complete online stranger, right? So it used to work. It used to work really well when we were getting $100 book appointments, $80 book appointments. It was just a volume game. But now we're paying $500 per book appointment, $800 per book appointment. So things get stingy when people don't show up, and then sales cycles take longer. So what I always think is, what's the end? What's the ultimate thing? What's the main thing? Okay, what are we trying to sell? Are we trying to help SaaS businesses sell for the highest multiple possible, right? Okay, so we start there, and then we develop the front end low ticket offer to attract those people that want to sell. Now, here's something else: is that's one of the reasons why I like book funnels so much, because people that buy books, they generally are super high quality, right? People that buy books, they generally get it, they understand. And if you think about it, there's a lot of people out there selling really, really expensive stuff, but you can still go into Barnes and Nobles or Amazon and just get a $5, $20 book from them, right? So I really like book funnels for that reason. If you're hunting for whales, that's another Frank Kern, terminology. If you're hunting for whales, do not use minnow bait, right? So a book is generally a whale, type of bait, right? So book funnels I really like. Mini courses, it depends on what you're doing, because I agree with you. Some people, they don't want another course. They just want the implementation, right? So that's another thing that we've been trying to gear towards with the use of AI and vibe coding. We're putting together mini tools. So it's not that much about the information contained in the course or the low ticket offer. It's about giving them a quick win fast. I always think about it like that, right? Like, how can we give these guys that we're trying to attract, these people that we're trying to attract, a fast, quick win? And whatever quick means for you, it could be a week, it could be 24 hours, it could be 20 minutes, right? If you show them how to position their business or their SaaS business to get a 15x multiple or whatever, right? I'm making this up. You're the expert on this.
We would love to have that business.
Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah, that would be great. But let's say
Yeah.
if you do that through AI, with a little tool, then that gives them clarity and awareness. So it's like, okay, now that you know what to fix in your business, let's hop on a call. Let's see if we can help you fix it, and you can help you position it so that we can help you sell it, right? So I think that there's some positioning that needs to happen for you to attract the right people. But I always think about, okay, what's the end? And what I'm noticing right these days is that low ticket offers, they fit really well when you have a high ticket VSL funnel, high ticket book a call funnel working. They fit really well because if anything, now instead of getting people, just leads, going through the process, watching a presentation, booking a call, now you're getting buyers through the same process, which again increases the quality by a lot. So they fit really well when you have your high ticket offer dialed in, if that makes sense.
It does. So I like what you have to say about the ecosystem. And I'm glad you also talked about consumption rate, because one of the issues, like my buddy Roland Fraser, he shut down his course about buying businesses. I loved his stuff. I think he teaches really advanced strategies that too many newbies buy, thinking that they can do these advanced strategies. But he's a great guy. I know he's a legit business buyer, despite the naysayers. I've many chats with him. But he shut down his course because one of the reasons he did the course was he thought he was going to get a lot of deal flow out of it. Like a lot of people are partnering with him on their deals, right? Which didn't materialize because, as we both know, many people buy a course, they end up doing nothing. He told me he had some people who paid him all this money and they never logged in once. So he's just like, this is like not inspiring me at all, right? So it was one of the reasons he shut it down. And that made me think of what another friend of mine talked about is like the speed of consumption, the speed of getting a win. And that made me question the book funnel a bit because books, as you mentioned, like this is a well thing. Like this is like sit down, let's read this. We're going to spend a few days reading this at the very least before they're done consuming and ready to move to the next step. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think that's true on the book funnel versus like giving a quick win, like a Notion template or something like that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's a great question. And the reason why we do book funnels and why I like book funnels is because of the quality of people that they generally attract, right? The quality of people that they generally attract is generally higher versus a course. So that's one option when it comes to a low ticket offer. And by the way, I'm a big advocate of having more than one of these low ticket offers running at any given time,
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah, that was going to be the second part of my question, but yeah, I agree. Having multiple funnels makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm a big fan of that because different people will react to different types of offers. But what I'm not a big fan of, especially these days, is to sell those long, drawn out courses, 47-hour courses, modules and modules and modules. That's not what I'm really after. So whenever I do a book funnel, which is content heavy, I'm doing it for the sake of positioning, authority, and for the sake of attracting the right people, right? Attracting high quality buyers into my funnel. So that's the only reason why I would do like a content heavy type of offer. Anything else would be fast implementation. And by fast implementation, because let's be honest, people don't need another 47-hour course, especially when you're selling to high level individuals like you, right? Like you're selling to business owners, they're generally busy. They don't have the time to go through a 47-hour.
As our podcast schedule has proven between you and me.
Exactly. Yeah, we have
Yeah,
to push it
yeah.
back times. So anyway, but that's the thing. So what I like to do is I like to think about strategic offers versus tactical offers, right? Strategic offers are things that show them how to do a big thing, like how to grow your YouTube channel to 1 million subscribers, if anyone wanted to do that. Those offers, they generally have many steps in them. Now, on the tactical side of things, I would say how to put together your lightning to look professional in 10 minutes, right? So you see how we grab one step of this whole overarching strategy and we put it into a tactical offer that they can consume, they can apply, and they can get a win in 10 minutes, right? You can do this with AI, you can do this with a mini course, you can do this with, not a mini course, but a template, something like that, right? Or if you do a mini course like I do, my best performing offers, there's just like 2 Loom videos on a thank you page. That's it. It's like do this and then see how your ads work better, right? So when you position it like this, then people, when they get a win, 3 things happen. Number one, they trust you, right? Which they didn't know you 5 minutes ago. they trust your process, but most importantly, they start trusting themselves, which is like, oh, I can do this. I can position my company for an exit. I just need to fix these things, but now I have awareness. And awareness is also a big win, right? And it segues beautifully into the next step, which is like, okay, do you want help implementing this stuff that you just learned? Let's go ahead and do it together. So awareness, quick wins, that's where my mind goes. And then on the other end, you might have a book funnel just for the authority and trying to get the right people through the funnel, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. I like what you said there about the quick wins. I was thinking the YouTube lighting one, I literally get an ad about that. Like as I was setting up this office, like, are you an idiot with lighting? I am. Tell me more. Like where are we going? Right. But we're coming up on time. I do want to discuss this ecosystem thing. So I've been with EF for like 10 years. I've helped over 2,500 businesses, 96 millionaires made at the moment of exit. So I've seen a lot of different business models. I've seen a lot of different things. And the one weakness I see in almost every one of my clients, on the seller side at least, is that they are mono channel. Like they're doing one traffic source, one sales page, one sales funnel, all that kind of stuff. Especially with SEO crashing, I feel like I'm like reskilling myself. Like you can't rely on one channel anymore. Don't do that, or one funnel. So talk to me a bit about the ecosystem. How would it work? Like, book funnel? Do we go to a challenge funnel after that? Or are we intermixing like retargeting with a book a call funnel and then switching to another funnel if that doesn't work? Like how does the ecosystem of funnels work in your view?
Yeah, I love that question. And there's this risk that happens when you have just one way of acquiring customers, right? So that
Oh
might
yeah.
impact
Yeah.
valuation at the end of the day. Okay, I've been paying
Massive.
attention. Okay,
Massive.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So no, but here's what I like to do as kind of an 30,000 foot overview when it comes to the ecosystem and how we approach paid media in general. This day and age, what I like to do for the most part is 80% of our advertising budget goes to low ticket offers or some sort of client acquisition mechanism, right? It could be, I consider challenge low ticket offers too, because generally it's a free
Sure.
challenge with a paid upsell, or it could be a paid challenge, or it could be a paid presentation like workshops do well, case studies do well as, low ticket offers as well. But anyways, anywhere between, I want to say 70 to 80% of our budget goes towards some sort of client acquisition mechanism, right? And then we have this 20%, 15 to 20% of our budget, cold traffic. We're talking about top of funnel, cold traffic, people that do not know who you are, they haven't heard about you before, right? So our top of funnel goes 80% to client acquisition, and then 20% goes to some sort of branding strategy or content, heavy strategy, which is like just grabbing your organic content and just pushing it out there with money, basically. And I also learned that from Frank Kern back in the day when he was launching intent-based branding. My friend Laurel Portier, she also does her own like flavor of it. But at the end of the day, it's basically grabbing a little bit of money, just grabbing your content, just pushing out there, pushing your content out to your ideal audiences, right? So that's the 80-20 of running top of funnel cold traffic ads. Anything else, if you do a monthly webinar or workshop for your audience, if you do a VSL straight up to book a call funnel, if you do anything else, goes to warm traffic. Anything else, because we have this machine built where you are acquiring customers, you're building up your list, you're building this engagement. You also have this other machine here building your warm audiences. So anything else, if you do a weekly webinar, a monthly webinar to try to scoop more buyers out of that, everything else goes to warm traffic, right? Via emails, via ads, via all of that. That's kind of the, how we're running ads and how we're building these ecosystems, especially when it comes to 2026 numbers, when it comes to show up rates on webinars, when it comes to conversion rates. You want to talk to people that have at least been through your process, that have at least, been exposed to your content at least once or twice. That's how we're seeing clients win when it comes to this, paid media strategy as a whole right now, 2026. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's something like I'm no paid media guy, but that's something I've always wanted to do with EF. Mixed success, bad agency hires, which is my fault. But I totally agree with that. With the retargeting thing, that does bring up, I guess, like maybe the final question, I'm not sure, but like, how is retargeting doing? Because we had the cookie apocalypse that happened. I know Facebook has been trying to fix that with Cappy, and there's been quite a bit of success there from what I've seen. Like, how is retargeting across all the platforms? Like, not just Meta, but TikTok, maybe even LinkedIn for the B2B people out there. But is that still good, or how are people going about retargeting these days?
Yeah, so it is good. You need to pivot a couple things like pixel only. Just having a pixel on your website doesn't cut it anymore. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
blockers and whatnot. So you do need to use CAPI. You do need to use server to server, integrations. You do need to, kind of bypass those blockers and that privacy. But here's the thing, what I'm noticing with retargeting specifically, and the way that I make the distinction between cold traffic, warm traffic, and retargeting. Retargeting means somebody visited your website and they didn't take action for whatever reason, right? They landed on your landing page, but they didn't move forward. That's, in my mind, is what I call retargeting. Now, with that being said, they work pretty well. Again, Meta, Google too, they're going towards this side of things where they're telling you, hey, give us your retargeting assets. Give us your top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel assets. Give us ads that are for different people in different awareness stages, right? Give us videos that are talking to those people that are really far from taking action. Give us videos on images that are, people that are right there. And then we will show it to the right people at the right time. It's still not 100%. It's getting there. Retargeting, where you try to do, I'm going to retarget these people that visited this website for the past 7 days, and I'm going to move them to this bucket and then this bucket. That it's less and less effective. But what is getting really effective is to build audiences within the platforms, like engagers, video viewers, people that have visited your website and whatnot. That's getting really, really effective. And that gets even further amplified when you do content, right? When you push out that content, because then you can show ads to those people that, for example, watch your videos for the past 30 days and they consume your entire video for the past 30 days, right? So those strategies are still pretty much really valid and we use them a lot. When you're trying to get like super granular like we used to, that's starting to be less and less effective, if that makes sense.
It does, and that tracks with what I understand about it too. Yeah, it seems like instead of like manually moving these people from bucket to bucket, from like top to middle to bottom, it's just almost naturally happening based on your creative, from what I understand, right? With
Exactly.
the targeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's where creative awareness really comes to play, or creative diversity really comes to play, right? You want to talk to different avatars, different people that are different awareness stages, and then that way you feed these platforms with creative diversity, and that's how we are seeing campaigns have a pretty long shelf life, and they keep on performing for a long time. So.
Makes total sense. Well, we reached the rapid fire section of this podcast, my friend. So I'm going to ask you three quick questions. You give me three quick answers. No pressure. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Dude, you already answered number one. Look at you. You're a pro. All right. First question, Hernan. What is the best hidden growth opportunities in paid ads today?
Putting content out there, putting a little bit of money behind that content, and show those people that engage with that content your call to actions.
Love it. What tools or resources can people use to help improve their paid ads?
I have a bunch of those. I can give you some tools and resources so you can put it.
This question is designed for you to be self promotional.
Of course, yeah, 100%. So I do have a free community where we hold workshops, and there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of bonuses and whatnot in there. So I'll give you the link for people to join. It's completely free, and I'm always sharing what's working over there. So.
Yeah, we'll add it in the show notes, man. Happy to promote good people stuff. So, all right, final question, hardest question. We cannot publish this episode if you do not answer it well. So, again, no pressure. But out of your decade plus in the world of internet marketing, what has been your funniest moment working in this industry?
My funniest moment, for some reason, this goes back when I was working with these big dogs. For some reason, in the middle of the week, we would be writing ads and writing sales letters and all of that. And we would just take breaks to go to bars in the middle of the day, like 11 a.m. And we would go in there, right? And then it would go in there and then would spend a considerable amount of time there. And then when we went out of the bar, the sun was not out there anymore for some reason. And then we will go back home, sleep early, and then the next day we'll wake up, write copy, launch ads, do marketing, and repeat the process over and over again. It was a lot of fun. I don't recommend it long term. It was not sustainable, but it was a lot of fun.
I'm an old oil field guy, and my oil field friends, we also go to bars a lot. But I remember watching Mad Men, and I was into marketing before Mad Men, but I watched Mad Men, like, dude, this guy has the coolest life, just like laying on the couch, hungover, daydreaming about ads from his like whiskey vendor. Like, man, marketing is awesome. Like, maybe even more convinced I wanted to get into this world. But I, early on in my marketing career, I also had a similar funny experience like that. And I agree, don't do it long term, but it is quite fun. All right, man. Well, I feel like I can probably talk to you for another 3 hours, to be honest. I didn't even get through all the questions. You're a font of knowledge, my friend. For anyone out there that wants to follow you, pick your brain, annoy you heavily on social media, where should they go?
Hernan Vazquez in all socials. I have a YouTube channel as well. We're putting more content in there and whatnot. And then my community as well. I'll give you access to that. I have a book called Low Ticket Profits. Low Ticket Profits, you can search on Amazon. You can go to lowticketbook.com to get a copy. And yeah, those are the ways that you can follow me and help me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It was great. It was so fun. Thank you so much.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, then you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.